On today's Game Plan crossover show, we talk to Adriana from her Everything New York Giants podcast. We'll talk about what we expect from our respective teams in tomorrow's game. We may discuss a little Giants 49ers history. Remember, as always, you can listen to this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as live on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when new content drops. You're inside the Johnny Dale Football Academy. Hello, Niner faithful, and welcome to the Johnny Dale Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game. We do that by talking through and dissecting game film to dive deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, as always, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and on this crossover show, as we play the New York Football Giants, I always think of Chris Berman G-Men saying that. We play the Giants tomorrow. So joining us is my friend Adriana from her podcast. We are excited to have her. Her show is called Everything New York Giants Podcast. We're going to get into how she got started and what her keys are for the game. Thank you for joining us so much. How are you, Adriana?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I am good. I'm ready for this game, ready as I'll ever be. Feeling a little bit more optimistic than I was at, say, 5 o'clock on Sunday. So things have turned around a little bit.
For sure, for sure. If you are just joining us on YouTube, remember the way that we boost the algorithm is hashtag JD49. We want as many Niner fans and today some Giants fans to see what's going on today. So we need to boost the algorithm. So hashtag JD49. So let's get into first a little bit how you got started. You're more than I like on your Instagram and stuff, it's just called fangirl. You are more than a fangirl. What you do for this team is so cool. I follow your Instagram. I pop in on your lives. I try and say what's up as much as I can. And you do a tremendous job. You are not just a fangirl. So tell us how that started.
Thank you. So I've been a Giants fan my whole life. I grew up in northern New Jersey. My grandfather had season tickets. My uncle went to the 87 Super Bowl. So my whole family's Giants fans. I always joke that like it's in my blood and I never really had another opportunity, which I think is for the best because if I was a Jets fan, my life would be a whole lot worse. So I'm like, thank God for my grandpa that he picked the right team. So where I grew up, it was mostly Giants or Jets fans, and that's pretty much it. So he picked the right team. But during the Joe Judge era, I'm from New Jersey. My husband's from Massachusetts. I was living in Massachusetts for a while with him, and we ended up moving to Connecticut in January 2021. So we moved in like the height of COVID where everyone's still in their house. We didn't know a single person. And we moved down here and I'm like watching Giants football that whole season. Prior to that year, I'm like at the bars in Massachusetts in a Giants jersey, just like embarrassing myself. But there was no other way for me to watch the games. And I always joke that like I must be a masochist because I'm like, I'm gonna watch it regardless. Like either I'm gonna be watching it at home on my phone somehow or at a bar. I might as well just go out and maybe I'll meet someone else. So I moved to Connecticut. I'm watching the games at home and I'm like, my uncle and my brother and my cousin are all really into Giants fans, or into the Giants, but I just felt like I needed an outlet where I could talk to other Giants fans and just be like, what are you thinking about this 3rd and 8 quarterback sneak on our 10-yard line? Like, am I the only one who thinks this is the worst football I've ever seen in my life? Or like, what's happening? So I started with the Instagram page and then I just made it a TikTok too, because at the time TikTok was really blowing up.
Right.
And I just kind of started it as like, I'm a Giants fan. This is atrocious football. Like, what are we doing here? How are we going to get through the rest of this football season? And I would say within the next year or so, during that off season when they I think there might have been one more year with Joe Judge, but during that offseason, there were a lot of changes in the draft and stuff like that. So as this season started, I had built up maybe like a couple hundred people, and I started getting DMs being like, who did they draft, or who's going to start this week, or who's injured, whatever. Do you know this? Do you know that? And so I ended up just kind of turning it into like a reporting type of page where I just share literally everything about the Giants. But I would get questions all over the map, like, again, who's starting, who's injured, what does this person's contract look like, are we bringing in this guy from any other team, whatever. So it just really evolved into this page where I always like to say that if you go to my Instagram or you listen to my podcast, you'll find out everything you need to know about the team. You're going to know the starting 53. You're going to know who's out there week one. You're going to know what type of scheme Wink is doing, that type of thing. So I just want to be, if anyone has any questions about the Giants or anything, like I want to be the number one source for people to get it all in one place without having to look at, 5 different Twitter accounts to figure things out.
That's amazing that it just stemmed from that, like little by little, all of a sudden, okay, you got people DMing you. And now I look at your stories now and you say like, ask me a question or something. And now you get like, you get like all
Yeah.
this and stuff. That's so incredible. Let's get into a little bit the New York Football Giants. And as Niner fans, I'll tell you, I feel like the overall consensus is we know you to be the team that started off the season down 60-0. And that's not hating, like that's just being
It's the
honest.
truth.
Because
Yeah.
we all watch on national television because
Mhm.
we play fantasy football, so we see it's 40-0, the game's over. Okay, then you are against our division rival, the Cardinals, that are like a AAA football team in our minds as 49er fans, and we're like, good lord, they're down 20-0. Like, what is New York doing? Like, we're licking our chops to play you. Then I look up and get an update on my phone, you win the game, and I go
Yeah.
to message you right away, like, oh my gosh, congrats. Like, so I really don't know enough. Like, what is going on with your football team?
I don't know. It was a crazy turnaround. I mean,
Well, it's been a great show, guys. Thanks for
yeah, I did this whole thing. I don't know anything about the Giants. See you guys later. But I went into this season so excited because last year, I know you guys probably didn't watch, but if you watched every Giants game, you saw a lot of different holes. And I feel like Joe Shane is extremely competent. What him and Brandon Brown have done in the front office is amazing. So this offseason, they bring in a lot of talent. They bring in a linebacker. They bring in Isaiah Simmons. They bring in all these veterans, Darren Waller, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt. We finally got a center. So we're all feeling like we're going to be good this year. Like we're going to kill it. We have a lot more talent. That was a big issue last year. And I'm at the Cowboys game and I'm like, what on God's green earth is happening? Because this is not how I saw this going on. I came into this game feeling like we're in a better position than we were last year. There's no reason why we shouldn't, at the very least, compete with the Cowboys. And then the blocked field goal that was returned for the touchdown was like, it all fell apart from there. And I just felt like, I don't know what happened at halftime. I don't know what was going on in the sidelines, but it just had this feeling of there was no shot of them turning it around. And the fact that they were the only team that didn't get a single point on the board after week one, I was like, not in my wildest dreams did I ever have any idea that this was how week one was going to go. So then you're like, okay, write it off. It was awful, but we're going into Arizona. They don't have Kyler Murray. Then we find out day of their best safeties not playing, their best defensive linemen's not playing, and one of their best veteran linebackers is out. So I'm like, we don't need Andrew Thomas. We're going to go in there and kill him. And then we're down again, and I just am like, oh my God, I am having flashbacks to last week. Like this is the worst team in the league, and I typically don't really buy the PFF and the power rankings and all that kind of stuff because I think it's a little bit of bullshit. But I'm like, they're ranked last in the NFL for a reason. Like there's this whole narrative going around that they're tanking. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It's very obvious to me that the players are not tanking. Whatever's going on in the front office is different. But they tried hard out there and they really tried to win that game. And I was like, our team's just not trying. I don't know what's happening here. Like, the talent's there. I know they didn't play a ton in preseason, but like, they've been together for the bulk of this off system. It's the second year in the scheme. They have the second year with the coaching staff. Like, I just don't know what's happening. And I think it all came down to execution. And I don't know if it was like lack of effort or just miscommunications and people didn't know what they were doing. Like, I just don't know what the issue was. But the second half, when they came out and they had that first drive with the Jalen Hyatt touchdown, I thought, oh my God, okay, I can breathe. They're at least not going to get shut out again. So I can feel a little bit better about this team. This is the offense that we thought it was going to be. Then Arizona marches right down the field, gets a touchdown. I'm like, oh my God, we are done. Our defense can't stop anything. Micah McFadden, I love the guy, but like, can't tackle if his life depended on it. I'm like, we can't do anything. So I don't know if they all of a sudden woke up, if they finally had enough time under their belt playing together that they actually could play and execute. It was very disheartening. But the fact that they got it together, Jones had a really good game. I walked out of that game feeling like, okay, this is the team that I expected them to be. This is what I want to see moving forward, just a little bit better, and like not having the first halves that they're having where they're down by 20 points and getting shut out. But I feel like there was no reason for it other than lack of execution and maybe just lack of playing time together before that.
You know, and the first couple of weeks of the NFL are always they can lie to you. And it's always kind of a mixed bag of trying to figure out what our teams are. Is this real? Is this not?
Mm-hmm.
You know, right now we're looking at the NFC South has 3 undefeated teams. Who thought that was going to be a thing coming into this year?
And how about the Bengals being 0-2? I mean, I never saw that coming.
And so, you know, it's kind of this mixed bag. And I felt like watching that Sunday night game, week 1, that blocked field goal, it just, everything got away from them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the next drive they came out, didn't establish the run. And one thing you can't do against the Cowboys is let them know you're going to be drop back passing every play, because they will eat you alive with the guys that they have up front. And it felt like they just, that part got away. And that is a matchup that is horrible for the Giants as far as if they've got to drop back every play against the Cowboys. They might be able to pull that off against some other teams, but I felt like the matchup of their offensive line versus the front that Dallas has, that was just, it was something that was a horrible matchup and got away from them, and they could never really get back on track from there, and it just snowballed. The bigger surprise was going down so early against the Cardinals, and you know, people like to say trap game, maybe. You know, you almost wonder, was it a situation like that? It might be also a situation of that this is a new Cardinals team. You don't have film on them in this system. You don't have a film on what they're trying to do. You have nothing of a track record of what that team wants to do from week to week. So it does become, you know, there is an advantage that Arizona has there in scheme wise of that they're going to be able to come after them. And, you know, their head coach knows New York very well. You know, he came from Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon, knowing what the Giants do, what, you know, he's got a folder of scouting on them and their scheme, and they have nothing on him. And so, you know, it felt like kind of there was a little bit of that advantage going on. So I think as Niner fans, we want to say, well, because Niner fans are almost acting like we have this, right? They're already sitting here saying, rest Brandon Ayuk, don't make him play, sit McCaffrey through the whole game, you know. But what I worry about is that it becomes that trap game that you say, well, you know, this Giants team, they were down 60-0 to start the season. Like you said, they did a lot of things to really move the needle as far as a team this year and in the off season. And I watched a lot of their film last year. Near the end, I was doing some scouting on the Eagles and watched both their games against the Eagles because they played them very, very tough. And so, you know, I wanted to see what was going on there. Now, once it got to the playoff game, that was a little bit different. But one thing, it was like you said, one thing that you noticed was that it wasn't like scheme-wise, they were blown out. Scheme-wise, they were overmatched. There was just a talent disparity between the Eagles and the Giants, and it was very glaring, especially on the front. The defensive line, Philadelphia's offensive line was just manhandling New York's defensive line. It was there were some of the things you saw from Dickerson and Kelsey just moving guys and throwing them on the ground that was crazy. But they did a lot of things to shore up the talent gap. And so, this is a team that you can't sleep on. Now, is Saquon Barkley going to play? That's a big question. Hearing that he's got a sprained ankle.
Yeah,
he's not going to play.
I don't think he's going to play, but they're being, well, he's a quick healer.
No, they're just saying that for our coaching staff.
But Kyle Shanahan is not a dummy. Like, he's
Thank you for saying that. We have some people that think he is.
No, he's one of the best coaches in the league, and anyone who thinks otherwise doesn't know anything about football. Like, it's not, I just think even if you're a rookie head coach, you know that Saquon has an injury history. You know he has an ankle injury history, and you're coming off a 4-day week. There is no chance in hell that Saquon is playing on Thursday.
And he's got to fly across country.
Yes. Dable can say whatever he wants, but I just think if anyone actually thinks that Saquon is playing, I don't know what they're doing. They got to be a little bit delusional, but like, I don't know why Dable is saying that. I'm sure he thinks that he's going to try and confuse Shanahan, but come on.
He's just trying to add to the short week workload.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. We know basically the elephant in the room probably for New York is like not one single thing can go wrong. And if it does, you may lose by double digits, even if it's a small thing. Like you misprotect one time and Bosa gets a strip sack and it's a 14-point swing the other way, right? Something like that. But in your mind, is there something that maybe you can give us that us Niner fans not following your team is something like, hey, guys, we're actually ranked 5th in the league in this, and watch out, because if we do this, it can be a ball game if you guys take it as a trap game. I'm just thinking out loud. Is there something like that you think can happen for the game?
I think it all comes down to the offensive line, because there's been a lot of question marks around there. We were missing Andrew Thomas for part of the Cowboys game. We missed him all last week. And there we go. Adam Schefter just tweeted, Giants ruled out running back Saquon Barkley for Thursday night. What a surprise.
What is that breaking news?
Yeah, breaking news from Schefter. I mean, I should be getting paid millions to report on this. Jeez. But it's all going to come down to the offensive line, because when Jones has time, we saw what he was able to do last week. I mean, he really drove this offense and was able to get 31 points in the second half. The fact that he was not the NFC player of the week is a joke to me. Like, I get DeAndre Swift had a great game, but Jones came back from being down 21 points. They ended up winning the game. He had no turnovers in one half. He had no turnovers, 250 passing yards, 50 plus rushing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown, which no quarterback has done since Mike Vick in 2010. So that alone is
maybe
really
he should get a half game award. Would that be okay with you? How about a half game? They don't give half game.
I know. I think that stat was interesting though. And I think a lot of fans, regardless of what team you like, and I think a lot of coaches up until maybe the second half of last year have kind of overlooked Daniel Jones, which is fair. Up until that point, I'm not going to argue that he's been the best quarterback in the league. He hasn't really done that much, but when he can escape with his legs and he's not under pressure the bulk of the time, he's really a good quarterback. I mean, we saw it last week. So if the line can give him time, I have a lot of faith in this offense, and I have a lot of faith in Jones. The biggest concern to me is if the line doesn't hold up, he's going to get rattled, and that's when he's going to make mistakes. That's when the pick sixes happen. That's when the interceptions, that's when he loses control of the ball. All of those things go wrong when he is rattled. And I don't blame him. The guy's been rattled for 90% of his career. I mean, the fact that he's doesn't have nightmares every night about getting sacked by Micah Parsons is like beyond me. But
Or Bosa.
yeah, I mean, so I hope that he can escape Bosa tomorrow. That would be like a really big win for me, is if Bosa doesn't sack him multiple times.
And that's a big question. 49ers fans have been wondering, where's Nick Bosa's production been? No sacks through two games. I will say, Nick Bosa, the Steelers obviously were planning on him playing, because I think Bosa was doubled 48% of the time against the Steelers. Mike Tomlin said, well, we're going to be ready in case Nick Bosa's there. No, they were 100% planning on him being there, doubled him a lot. The Rams, when I watched the film, they were doing a lot to try and slow Nick Bosa down. They were either doubling him, sliding the line to him,
including holding.
They were chipping with a tight end. They were chipping with a running back. There was a lot of things going on, but Nick Bosa still had a lot of pressures in that game. And the thing about Bosa is that there's a reason why he became the highest paid defensive player in the league, because he draws so much attention on that defensive line, and every team going into it has to spend several hours a week sitting down with their offensive line, their running backs, their tight ends, and installing game plan specific stuff of how we are going to handle Nick Bosa. I expect the Giants to come out and give a lot of tight end help. Yes. I think the worst thing they could do is say, we're going to let one of our tackles try and take Nick Bosa on one-on-one and let him make Daniel Jones do exactly what you were talking about, is throw some of those bad balls, make some of those mistakes, and they're going to try and really focus on that. And I think the big thing for the Giants is going to be actually not how you handle Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is still going to get pressures. You're going to double him. You're going to do all that stuff. It's how do they handle the familiar face of Javon Hargrave? And because if they're having to give all that attention towards Bosa, that means that Hargrave is probably going to be in there. It's either going to be him or Armstead. They're going to work and try and create one-on-ones with the guards there. How do you feel about the matchup there with Javon Hargrave on the offensive line of New York, somebody that you've seen go against your team a number of times?
Yeah. Well, they just ruled out Andrew Thomas, so not feeling the greatest. So the injury report just came out right now. So for tomorrow, we have no Saquon Barkley, no Andrew Thomas, no Azeez Ojulari, which is a surprise to no one, and then no Ben Bredeson, who's been our starting left guard, who actually out of everyone week one against the Cowboys was probably one of the better performers, him and John Michael Schmidt. So now we're looking at the same line that we saw last week, which is Joshua Ezeudu at left tackle, who this is his first year playing left tackle. He, prior to that, was a rookie and was a guard who dealt with some injuries and, to be honest, was not all that great. We've got Mark Lewinsky, who was absolutely atrocious during the Cowboys game. He's going to be at left guard. John Michael Schmitz is the one guy I am not the least bit worried about. He had 100% pass block rate last week, so I feel good about him. And then right guard, we have Marcus McKeithen, who also is basically a rookie because he missed all of last year with an injury. And then at right tackle, we have Evan Neal, who, if anyone watched the Cowboys game, know that Evan Neal has some struggles. So I expect there to be a lot of Daniel Bellinger in the mix blocking. I assume that Matt Breida is probably going to take on some blocking roles. We saw Darren Waller blocking last week. So I think whoever they can put on this field, maybe it's going to be an additional offensive lineman too. Whatever they can do to give Jones just that little bit of cushion and protection and help, so he has more than 1 second to make decisions, will drastically help him. So it's going to be interesting. I think those are going to be their only options at this point. Like when you're missing your all-pro left tackle and you've got a bunch of pretty much young guys in there who are not really experts at this yet, they need help. So I would say expect to see stuff like that. I mean, last year we even saw a couple plays where they had 8 offensive linemen out there. I don't think we have enough offensive linemen for them to do that tomorrow. But
just keep throwing them out there.
Just put anyone out there.
All offensive linemen.
Yeah. So it'll definitely be some of those guys in there, and I'm sure they're going to try and just run the ball a lot. They're going to have to see how the pass blocking does before they allow Jones to wing it out there to Hyatt. It's going to be interesting. But
Yeah.
outside of those two guys on your D line, who else do they have to worry about? Now, those are probably the two heavy hitters. Like for us, we have Dexter and Leo, who's been absent this year, and Kayvon, who's also been absent. But in theory, those three should be pretty good and something that, their offensive line should be a little worried about.
Yeah. So, I mean, outside of Hargrave and Bosa, you have Eric Armstead, who's not necessarily a household name, but he's a guy who earned a pretty sizable contract several years ago, got 11 sacks, has had production. He was sidelined a good chunk of last year with some foot issues, but he's a guy who's been on the team for 8 years now. I want to say he was drafted 2014. He's been around the team 2014, 15. My memory's a little shaky on that. It's ancient history sometimes, but he's been a very productive guy. And what the 49ers do is that they will utilize what's called a plugger roll a lot of times. So what they'll have, and they do this to create one-on-one passing rush opportunities. So they'll take one of their defensive tackles and it's whoever the line is sliding to will be in that role. They'll try and occupy both the center and the guard, and they don't necessarily rush. They just occupy the center of the guard, and once they draw that attention, they'll kind of sit there, and they're the pursuit guy as the quarterback might try and step up and out of the pocket. And so that allows them to, and usually they'll cross over a guard and try and occupy the center and guard. And that allows then ends and your other defensive tackle to get one-on-ones in passing, in pass rushes. And so if you're having to chip with a tight end and you're doing that, that's going to create one-on-one opportunities. And so it'll be interesting to see the game plan that goes back and forth. A lot of times they'll try and walk up Fred Warner on one side to draw a slide to that way. So I'll be interested to see if with Hargrave and his history there against New York and like I said, some of the missing pieces there on the interior line, are they going to walk Fred Warner up opposite Hargrave to try and draw a slide, so they have to account for him and give Hargrave one-on-ones on that guard. And then the other ends, it's been a mixture of Cleveland Farrell and Drake Jackson. Again, neither of them are household names, but Drake Jackson week 1 had 3 sacks. And a lot of that was because of the attention that Nick Bosa is getting, that Javon Hargrave is getting. And so what they're really good at, what Chris Kasurik, the defensive line coach, is really good at, is scheming up one-on-one in space defensive line on offensive line guys, so that they can use their quickness, they can use their power, they have everything in their toolbox. And so, that's where, if I was New York, I would be really worried about if we get in obvious passing situations, these guys are going to put you in space, and they're going to either set you up with quickness then hit you with power, or they're going to set you up with power and hit you with quickness, and it's going to be a real tough assignment all game long. The best thing they can do to help Daniel Jones is, like you said, run the ball, and don't let them get into those different sets that they like to do. Make them play gap assignments. And it sets up interesting, because there's a guy who played with the 49ers for a little while, Matt Breida, the Cheetah, he calls himself Matt Cheetah, but the guy's got speed. I will say that he's a home run hitter. We saw it with the 49ers back in 2019. It was first play of the game against the Browns. We ran a counter. He cut it back and took off for it was like a 78-yard touchdown, hit something like 22 miles an hour. Dude's got wheels. And so, you let him in the open space, he's a home run hitter, but he is no Saquon Barkley. And so what do they do? How do they try and get that running game going with Matt Breida there? Is there a little bit extra motivation for Breida? He was traded from the 49ers as he fell down the depth chart behind Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. And what does that look like? But I think the best thing that can happen for New York is this has to be an ice bag game, as Kyle Shanahan calls it, where it's going to be a beat each other up game, slog it out. You can't try and make this a shootout. This has to be a low scoring, slog it out fight for New York to have a chance here.
Yeah, I agree. They can't get behind early, because we don't yet know how the pass blocking is going to look. So last week, obviously, you saw that the pass blocking held up well, and Jones felt confident and had time and made those great throws to Hyatt and Waller and Hodgins and everyone. But if he doesn't have that, I mean, they have to run the ball. And that's one of the critiques, if you will, that all of us as fans have had with the offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka. And I love Kafka. I think he's a great coordinator. And I understand that during the Cowboys game, they got down very quickly. They were down 16-0 within like 5 minutes in the first quarter. So I get it. You feel like you have to switch it up and you have to start passing the ball. But they had success running the ball on that first drive. And I just feel like they shouldn't have let that go that easily. And that's one thing that I want to see happen this week, that even if they get behind early, because realistically, it's very much a possibility that they could be down 7-0 pretty quickly. So if the defense is not making stops and that's what happened, I really don't want to see them just abandon the run immediately. We just don't. I mean, maybe in the second half, but I just feel like in the first half, they really have to be smart about running the ball. You know, we have Matt Breida, who, like you said, is a great back. Obviously, he's not Saquon, but we do have guys like Gary Brightwell and Eric Gray, who are both on the younger side. They're newer to the team, but Eric Gray has shown to be very promising. He's built very much like Saquon, and he does have the speed, and he is a really good north-south runner. He can be used in the backfield. He has good pass catching abilities. So I think we'll see a rotation there. It won't be Matt Breida all the time, which is for the best, right? Like, he's not Saquon. And I think even regardless of who it is, I don't know if you want to see your running back every single down, every single time they have the ball. So I'm curious to see how they really switch it up between the three of those guys. I think Breida will get the bulk of the carries, but we will see some other guys rotated in, and I'm curious to see how that goes too. But I really want to see them run the ball and do it well.
Yeah, and at least stick with it. I mean, they have to get some sort of production, some sort of commitment to keep doing that. Shout out to Adam. He apparently his internet failed where he's at. That's why he just kind of dropped out of there. He's trying to get back in, waiting for the internet to come back. But I think a lot of it's going to come down to as well is, can Daniel Jones convert on third down? If they're going to be committing to the run, and that's going to be a tough sled against this 49ers team when you have, you know, linebackers like Fred Warner, Drake Greenlaw, and that front. You're going to have a lot of 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yard runs. It's just going to be the game. And that's why I say you got to make it an ice bag game. That means Daniel Jones has to convert 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 5. And that's going to be the challenge in this game. Can Daniel Jones do that? Can they protect him long enough? Can he operate the quick passing game? One thing that I've seen from Daniel Jones that he's not always the most efficient at is getting the ball out quick. He tends to hold the ball a little bit longer. He's not going to be, you know, we saw 49ers fans were very frustrated with our defense last week and watching him against Matt Stafford, because pretty much the whole first half, Matt Stafford, that ball was out at about 2 seconds. You know, it was coming out. They were running everything short. Everything was a 3, 4, 5 yard route, it seemed. They'd catch it and then they'd fall forward and get 2 yards. And it was, you know, 5, 6, 7 yard passes for the whole first half almost. And that was very effective against this 49ers team. I think they were expecting LA to try and go down the field. And so, you know, I think they're going to expect New York to try and do the same thing. You know, this is a guy that holds the ball a little bit longer. Can Daniel Jones get that ball out? Is it going to be, how does he operate that on third down? How's his anticipation against this 49ers team? That's going to be the big challenge for New York is, can Daniel Jones convert on the money downs on 3rd, 6, 3rd and 7? That's where you earn your keep as a quarterback. And that's one thing that I think for me, I want to see from Daniel Jones going forward is, can you operate in those situations? We know you can hit the 25-yard out route. You got a big arm. You know, we know you can do that. We know that you can hit the laser down the seam. I want to see you be able to convert and look somebody off and get a 7-yard completion on 3rd and 8 where your guy can fall forward and get a first down. You know, you don't always have to throw that 15-yard route on 3rd and 7, you know, 3rd and 8. And that's where he's tended to be a little bit. You know, switching over to the other side, one thing that Kyle Shanahan has always been really effective at in his scheme is he goes after linebackers. And when teams put a safety in the box, he goes after those guys so much. Everything in the scheme is based around that. It's about the wide zone. It's going to get guys on the move, and then you're going to come back against it. Then you're going to go play action. And even in your drop back passing game, there's going to be a lot of high-low stretches on your linebackers. How do you feel about your linebackers, kind of those second-level defenders, going against this 49ers team, having to match up in space with guys like Kittle, maybe even Debo, Christian McCaffrey? How do you feel about that matchup?
Not great. Prior to week 1, I would have said I felt a lot better. We brought in Bobby Okereke, who is a veteran in the league. He's a great tackler. He's fast. And, he stepped it up last week against the Cardinals. But, I mean, they basically let James Conner run all over us. So I don't have a ton of faith that all of a sudden they're going to turn it around and be able to stop Christian McCaffrey, the best running back in the league. I feel like maybe they can get a little momentum, but one thing that was a huge issue for us last week is, Micah McFadden, who's on the younger side. It's his second year. He was drafted last year. He dealt a little bit with injury, but he ended up winning the starting job opposite Bobby Okereke, and he missed a lot of tackles last week. And, I think it ended up being only 4, but if you were watching the game, it felt like it was 50. And part of that is technique. As Carl Banks said, it looked like he was trying to tackle with his arms instead of his body. And when you watched it, it looked exactly like that. Like he was going with the arms and guys' legs are just running straight through him. So I don't think that that's something that can be corrected that quickly. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like Bobby Okereke should be better this week. I need to see more from Dexter and Leo and not rely so much on the linebackers and safety to stop the running backs. But I just think the reality is that's probably what it's going to be. So I want to see Micah McFadden step up this week. I'm sure that he's going to be playing again opposite Bobby Okereke. The only really other option we have there right now, I mean, we'll probably see more of Isaiah Simmons. I hope that he can step up. But the other guy is Darian Beavers, who is still very young. So I think they're just kind of hoping that McFadden's going to play a little bit better this week. I don't know. Maybe they're going to try and bring Xavier McKinney up a little bit more, have him stack the box, see if he's going to be able to help out Bobby more than McFadden can. Maybe he'll be a buffer. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But they're going to have to do that, or else we know that CMC is going to run all over them and it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, Isaiah Simmons is an interesting one because, we know him very well, him being with the Cardinals for so long. And what was always interesting is when we'd play the Cardinals, Isaiah Simmons would almost always end up getting matched up against George Kittle. And that was not a good matchup for Simmons. So it'll be interesting to see, does Wink Martindale move away from that? Does he try and get a different matchup there? One thing about Wink Martindale is that dude's aggressive as a defensive coordinator. I mean, he loves pressures. He loves lots of blitzes. He'll trust guys to play a lot of man coverage on the back end. That means you're going to get a lot of one-on-one matchups. And the idea is win early so that they don't have to win long. And so, it'll be an interesting thing there. We've played Wink Martindale a couple times now. I remember back in 2019 when he was with the Ravens, we played against them. Now the Ravens played us very tough that game. Now it was also a monsoon in Baltimore that week. I think there was a tropical storm that had come in and it ended up raining for like 36 straight hours before the game, and through the game. So, I mean, it was literally a monsoon. It rained something like 12 inches over the couple days. Yeah, it was one of those, hurricane had formed in the Gulf and it went up the East Coast and it landed right over Baltimore as a tropical depression, just doused the whole area. And Wink Martindale, man, he was bringing lots of pressures, lots of gap fits in there. And then obviously seeing him with New York now, he stuck to a lot of that same scheme. I mean, dude loves to bring pressure. I want to say it was last year he blitzed something like 46% of the time. I mean, he's loving to bring pressure. It's going to be interesting because it's very different than the 49ers scheme. 49ers scheme is very conservative on a blitz from defensive side. They do not blitz a lot, and Wink Martindale is all about the pressure. And
Yeah.
so that'll be a fun matchup there. And I'm interested to see, like you said, does he try and match up some safeties there, bring a guy like Simmons, just rushing him every play, letting him use his athletic ability, try and speed up the passing game, to try and force the issue in the run game. And how does that go? I think, if this is a game that it's either going to be a slog out or it'll get away from New York pretty early.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens, because it's going to be a high risk, high reward kind of game for New York, that they're going to have to really go for it. And when you do that, you open yourself up to some opportunities, but if they're able to pay off on some of these gambles, this is a game that I don't think San Francisco can just write off and say, yeah, we're just going to walk away with this one.
Yeah. And I also think, one of the biggest concerns for fans, and I'm sure for Wink going into the season, was he's got 2 rookie corners. And, one thing that he said and that Dable said is that they earned it. They didn't, get the starting job because they're rookies and they were drafted by Dable and they love them. Like, they really beat out some of the other guys that have been on this team for a handful of years at this point. So, there was a lot of concern that we know Wink loves to bring the pressure, but how do you feel about having 2 rookies, especially week 1, going up against guys like CeeDee Lamb and Gallup and Cooper and, these types of players that were like, definitely we're a little concerned about it. And I think we're all starting to develop a little more confidence in them. Banks has been playing quite well. So has Hawkins. We have a Dory who's been rotating in the slot and the outside. So I feel better about those guys than I did going into week 1. So I'm curious if that's going to be something that maybe they think they're going to target, though, because they know that they're rookies and it's only week 3. They're still relatively new. Kayvon has not had any luck getting to the quarterback at all. Aziz is injured, so they probably are going to have to use Simmons and use him in the front and have him put pressure and leave those guys out on an island. And, either they're going to be able to cover George Kittle or they aren't. We saw them struggle a little bit last week with Zach Ertz, which is, this has been a Giants issue for a long time. They can't cover the tight end. So, I mean, if you have George Kittle in fantasy, maybe I would start him. I don't know, but
she's not feeling good about their chances to stop George Kittle.
No, I feel better about them covering the wide receivers because Banks is fast, Hawkins is tall. Like they have really good athleticism. They've made some good plays, so I feel good about that. I don't know what it is about the tight end position. It's just all of a sudden like they can't cover them like they can cover a wide receiver. So I don't know. Maybe tomorrow will go differently, but I would say that if Shanahan starts attacking that, I will not be the least bit surprised.
Yeah, and one thing he does, especially with young corners, is make them tackle. So one thing that they love to do is see how are these young guys gonna adjust and how are they gonna play when we start running at them. Because corners oftentimes, they're guys, they're not used to just getting in there and mixing up in the run game. And San Francisco loves to get on the edges in the run game. And it's not just in McCaffrey tossing him out there wide zone. It's those swing passes that we saw Debo, take a number of those last week against LA because, well, for the last many years, Kyle Shanahan has not really had a lot of respect for LA's corners and their tackling ability. And so he went right after Darion Kendrick. He went right after Kella Witherspoon. Was going to say, we're going to make you guys get physical in this run game because he uses that as an extension of the run game. It's just a swing pass. It's a bubble screen. It's out there on the edges. They run tosses. They run reverses. They try and get you out there. They will have their receivers take off leave the corner to go block a safety and make that safety come in, take on a block or get in there physical in a tackle, and they're going to test them and say, how are you going to do this? And if they start getting too aggressive, then you're going to see them try and hit some play action down the sideline on these corners. But they're going to say, we're going to see if you young guys are ready to get in here and try and tackle a Christian McCaffrey or a Debo Samuel on the edge. And they play so physical. And so that's how I see Kyle. He's not a big, like, you get in there and let's throw a 50-50 ball up against this corner. And that's actually something that has tended to frustrate 49ers fans over the years is that, it seems like we've had guys on our back end over the years that if they came in the game, you knew immediately the next play, the other team was going to go up for a 50-50 ball against them. Like we had a guy for a long time, Dante Johnson. Anytime Dante Johnson came in, you knew the very next play they were going to run a 50-50 ball against Johnson. I mean, it was guaranteed. Okay, corner went down, Johnson's in there, here it comes, and there it would go, and most of the times the other team would win, and it was so frustrating to see that happen. And every time we'd play somebody and their corner would go down, we never did it. We never tested their corner early, like no matter what spot they were on the depth chart if they came in the game. And so that I don't see Shanahan testing them that way as far as, we're gonna see how you match up on some of these 50-50 balls. I see him, force these guys to get physical. So one question Adam has, he's in here, he's with us in spirit. Is he wants to know, being from New York and as a New York fan, what is your take on Brock Purdy? He's a young guy. What's the perception of him outside of 49ers fandom?
I think it's twofold. I think that a lot of fans have respect for him and what he's done so far, and the fact that he's been able to step in so quickly and really make a name for himself and play well above probably what anyone expected from him, being, Mr. Irrelevant. But I also think that there's the narrative from fans, which I think is maybe warranted. You can tell me otherwise. Is that he stepped into one of the best offensive systems and coaches in the NFL. So, if we put Daniel Jones in there, or Jalen Hurts, or, maybe someone like Desmond Ridder, I don't know, if you put any other NFL quarterback in there, maybe someone who's not a top 5 quarterback, would they also have the same level of success that Brock Purdy has had? I don't know, maybe. I feel like it could go either way. Obviously, maybe you're not putting CJ Stroud in there or Anthony Richardson and having him look as good as Brock Purdy does, but maybe they are. I don't know. But I think Shanahan and the system gets a lot of respect, and I think that's why people feel like that. Like, there's a lot of talent there. Shanahan's an amazing coach. He's got the offensive system down. He always knows how to make it work, regardless of who's on the field.
Yeah, and I think that does it's right. Like you say, there's almost this twofold thing. I think 49ers quarterbacks, when they've had success, whether it be Jimmy, now Brock Purdy, there's this assumption that and out of, like you said, out of a respect for Kyle Shanahan and knowing how good he is,
right,
that it's the result of Kyle Shanahan. Now, on the flip side of that, we've also seen quarterbacks like Trey Lance, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, Brian Hoyer not have that same success.
Right.
And the key, I think, with Shanahan's system is a guy who can operate that system, who fits that system really well. And what does that mean? That means a guy who can process quickly, who can do the little things of footwork tied to where your eyes are to open up zones and move things around. The one thing I've been really there's several things I've been really surprised at from Purdy, just from a film perspective, is that he looks like a 6 or 7 year vet when you see him playing. And having seen a number of young guys, like I said, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, now these are not quarterbacks that anybody's going to sit here and really love if you're starting for your team. So that's not really saying much. But, Trey Lance, is that he was so much far beyond that. And when I look at quarterbacks around the league, I've watched a lot of different teams and their film and quarterbacks over the last few years, that Brock Purdy just looks different than a lot of young guys. He just does. And this is coming from a guy, I was not sold on Brock Purdy. I didn't know anything about him coming out of college. It was just what the film showed me last year, of that he was able to do things that you do not see from rookies, period. You go back and look at Trevor Lawrence's film, his first year, Brock Purdy was doing things that Trevor Lawrence was not doing. As far as the smoothness in the system, the how well his footwork was, how he was manipulating defense with his eyes, those sorts of things that you tend to see at a 4, 5, 6 year vets that he is doing, and that's had a huge part of the success that Brock Purdy's had. Now, it doesn't hurt having a Kyle Shanahan. I think when you pair that with a Kyle Shanahan, that's when you see the 30 plus points a game. And that's when you see this high efficiency, something like 80+% in throws between 10 and 19 yards. I mean, that's ridiculously high. Yeah. He's number 1 in the NFL over that. So it's not just a situation where you can plug, I think, anybody in there. I think you can. There's some guys you can plug in that system who might work really, really well in somebody else's system, but I don't think they're going to function as well in this system. I think you can plug some guys in that may not function well in somebody else's system, and they will look better in this one. But Brock Purdy, he's the real deal, and I think the film has really spoken about it. But I can understand the perception from around the NFL, as of respect for Kyle Shanahan of, well, it helps having the best play caller in the NFL calling plays for you. And it does. I mean, some of the things you see that are open, there was one play we hit Ayuk over the middle and there was nobody around for like 10 yards, so you sit there and go, well, I'd love to give Brock Purdy his flowers on that, but I'm pretty sure any quarterback could make that throw, but there are others there tends to be 5, 6, 7 plays a game that is dependent on the quarterback and that they have to make a really high level play. And other than that, yes, this is a very stacked roster and something that, 49ers fans are looking at and going, okay, just stay healthy, kind of a thing. What I'll be really interested to see through the year is what New York looks like as they develop through the year. I think they have a team that is young. Like you said, there's a lot of youth on that team.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new pieces. I think they've really got to gel. I really do. I think New York is going to be tougher down the stretch than people would give them, than would think right now, looking at kind of how their performance has been the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I think that's been a frustration because we feel like the talent is there for a lot of people and a lot of players on the team. Like, yes, Banks and Schmitz and Hyatt, all these guys are young, but you feel like they have the talent. They just have to really get out there and play. But with guys like, the offensive line and the defensive line, like I know they didn't play a lot in preseason. I do think that that's part of the issues that they're having. So like you, I'm very curious. I feel like the second half of this year, they will be much better than what we've seen so far. My biggest concern was, I know the season is a marathon, not a sprint, but you go down 0-3. If they lose to the Cardinals on Sunday, then they lose to you guys tomorrow, it's a slippery slope. And I think that whether you're a fan or you're one of the actual players, like you're losing confidence. And I think the biggest thing that the second half of the Cardinals game did for the players was it gave them confidence that they could actually make these plays, where prior to that, they haven't. And maybe that's a result of them being young. Maybe it's a result of them not playing a lot in preseason. But I do think that as long as everyone stays healthy, the more that they continue to play throughout the season, we'll see them play better. We saw that happen last year with them too. Same thing. A lot of guys, new system, new coaches, everything, the second half of the year was better. So hopefully they really hit their stride sometime soon and are able to continue it through the regular season and the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, as San Francisco fans have known that slow start for several years now. It seems the biggest frustration to know how hard it is to dig yourself out of that. Right. Our slow start cost us that first round bye last year. And who knows what happens in the playoffs if you get that first round bye versus Philadelphia. But I think coming out of that NFC Championship game, one thing that really became a shared perception or maybe feeling between our two fan bases was the equal hate for Philadelphia and their fan base. I will say I did not fully realize how cantankerous the Philadelphia fan base was until that game. I have never blocked so many people on Twitter in my life. I'm serious. DMs. I'm sitting here going, I'm not even like a huge 49ers content creator. I don't feel like it. And I was getting flooded in my DMs from Philadelphia fans. Yeah. I probably blocked 200 people. And it literally was happening during the game. I mean, just some of the most heinous stuff. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is a football game, y'all. Yes. And we don't even have a quarterback. Like, I know I'm probably preaching the choir here, but man, that was brutal.
Well, and that's my biggest problem is, listen, I take this very seriously. I treat what I do on the side as a job. It's not my full-time job. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's sports. I mean, they're not heart surgeons. They're not saving lives. Like, they're making millions of dollars to play football, and we're sitting there watching. We don't work for the organization. We're not involved in any of this decision makings. So, like, I get it, and I see both sides of it. But the disgusting messages that I have seen from people to the point where they have said that they hope Darren Waller relapses is so disgusting and indicative of them as people outside of them as football fans that I will not tolerate it. I cannot deal with it. It is so horrific. I was debating going to that playoff game, and thank God I didn't. But I had heard when I was on Instagram and I was asking people, like, if you're a Giants fan and you've been to an Eagles game, please tell me your experience and tell me whether or not I should go. And every single message said, do not go under any circumstances. And then I get a message from Howard Cross, who's won a Super Bowl with the Giants. He's a former tight end. He still works with the organization. I've had him on my podcast. He DM'd me and said, do not go to that game under any circumstances. It's not safe. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm staying home. Like, that's the only thing I needed to hear. And, you know, he said, it doesn't matter whether it's a 1 o'clock game or a 4 o'clock game, like, they're all bad. But the fact that it was an 8:15 game on a Saturday, you know that people are there from 9 o'clock in the morning drinking, like, it's just going to be an ugly scene. And I was like, that's it. I think I've spoken to one Eagles fan who is very nice in my DMs. Him and I have a nice rapport. He's the only nice Eagles fan I've ever met in my entire life. I swear to God, the only one.
Yeah, I do have one friend, close friend, he's an Eagles fan, and he is not the Philadelphia Eagles fan. He moved from Philadelphia. I live in Alabama. He's in Alabama here, and he's a lot more has the Southern hospitality now than the vitriol I saw from Philadelphia fans up there. But yeah, so what real quick before we let you out of here, what is your score prediction for tomorrow night?
That's a good question. I'm going to be optimistic on this, and I'm going to say that the Giants are the Giants that we saw in the second half of last week, in the sense that they can string together offensive drives. The defense can make stops when necessary. And I think that they can put some points on the board. I don't really think that they're going to win. I think it's going to end up being something like 30-20 Niners, but I think that they will get points on the board. And at times they will look like the team that we saw last week and give us fans a little bit of that optimism that they're not as bad as they've been playing like.
I like it. I like it. I can't really disagree much on there. I'm actually going to say it's probably going to be 28-14. Okay. I think New York's going to have a hard time scoring. And I do think part of that 14, I do believe that's going to be a defensive touchdown. I think somewhere in there, they're going to be coming in firing, trying to create a turnover. I think it's going to be a fumble or maybe a pick. Brock Purdy hasn't thrown a pick yet. We'll see what happens. But I think they're going to have a real hard time scoring on that defense coming across the country on a short week. I mean, that's a brutal. The schedule makers really stuck it to New York on that one. I mean, to have to fly all the way across country on a Thursday.
I know,
man.
We're
I mean,
lucky that they were in Arizona already on Sunday, so they're not going as far. But still, I mean, they got to the West Coast, who knows, maybe Wednesday of last week, and you're still adjusting a little bit from Arizona, where it was probably 700 degrees, to, you know, San Francisco, which will be a little bit cooler, but, you know, I'm sure it's still pretty warm out there. And Thursday night, one of my favorite quotes from one of the beat writers is, you know, talking about the Thursday night football game. Mr. cares about the players, Goodell, and how much he loves the Thursday night football game. And I'm like, couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, loves to protect the players, except when Amazon offers over $1 billion.
Yeah, and they want to extend the season to 17 games. Next year, it'll probably be 18.
Yeah, it's I personally, I don't like the 17 games. I would like to keep it at 16 games. I hate the idea of 18 games. Absolutely hate it. It's too much on the players. And to me, there's something about the history of the game, of some of the records that have been there, and seeing them. And it was like the first year you had a 17 game season, almost every single season record's getting broken, you know, and it's like you have to put caveats on this, and it's almost like you're starting a new era of things to look at. And as somebody who's been a fan of the NFL for so long, and with football, it's like you're starting to get a disconnect of from the legends of the past to now, and the performances and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it seems silly, but to me, that was just a big thing there. But I think the 49ers I think they're gonna start out slow. I really do. I think they're going to struggle scoring in the first half, and teams are going to be ready to fire Shanahan by halftime, or fans are going to be ready to fire Shanahan by halftime, at least on Twitter and or X. But because we generally have struggled on Thursday games, that short week, the preparation is just they're so detailed in their preparation. I think it just becomes too hard to cram in such a short period, that Thursday games, we just tend to start slow. We have under Shanahan, that's just been the thing. But I think the defense ends up, I do think they get a couple turnovers there, and they make it hard for Daniel Jones. So I'm thinking 28-14 is how it's going to end. And but I think the Giants are going to be a team that starts surprising people late in the year. I think their talent's going to start to get together. I think if they get healthy on their offensive line, I think the schemes are going to start coming together. The players are going to start coming together. And hopefully, I hope that they can really start sticking it to Philadelphia late in the year. That's what I hope.
You and me both. Nothing would make me happier.
Well, Adriana, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you were expecting to be talking to Adam through most of this, and then the internet failed him. He just dropped right off. But thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck to your team this week. Any last message to the faithful?
Thank you so much, too. Good luck to you guys. All I have to say is go Giants. I just want them to excite me a little bit. That's all I'm asking for.
Just give you a few moments to cheer about. And real quick, where can people find you if they want to follow you? They want to stay up with some of the Giant stuff?
So I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Newyorkgiantsfangirl. I'm also on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, NYG Fangirl. And then my podcast is called Everything New York Giants. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And for everyone in the chat and watching live, let's go Niners.